Well, hello and welcome to everyone. Welcome to those of us in the Heater Center. We're so glad to be here. And we're especially glad that Guy has drove all the way up and is here with us. And welcome to everyone on the internet. We're glad to have you too. Some of you would have very far travel if you were traveling here. So we're glad to see your smiling faces on the internet. And want to also say hello to anyone watching and after we've recorded this. So hello to you also. Welcome to today's platform. We're going to be talking about living ethics today, and I think it's going to be exciting, and hopefully we'll have some deep and prosperous thoughts. So welcome and get your thinking caps on.
Thank you, Phyllis, for that grand welcome. I would like to share some announcements that are coming up. Please don't forget about our exercise that happens on Thursday evenings and at 7:00 p.m. Now the Zoom link for those Thursday evening programs has changed. So be sure to check out the newsletter that will be coming out Monday evening for Tuesday morning for that updated link. And it can also be found on our website. Sunday, March 27th platform is Superheroes, Yoga Mats, and the Art of Mindfully Living Out Your Values. And this is with a guest speaker, Drew Beckius. Anthony's shaking his head. I did pronounce it correctly. All right, and this Drew's program, Mindfulness According to Google, is the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something. So what does it look like to be a mindful humanist? In Superheroes, Yoga Mats, and the Art of Mindfully Living Out Your Values, humanist coach Drew Beckius is going to help us consider what it might look like to practice our humanism more intentionally, more honestly, and more vibrantly, while also having a bit more fun in the process. So make sure to join us next Sunday, March 27th, as we upgrade our collective humanist lifestyle. And we've just added some more to our in-person gathering. Hello, Rick, and hello, Morty. Our mission for today is, well, actually, it is our mission, not just for today. The Susquehanna Valley Ethical Society is a community of all walks of life that learns and grows together through shared values, doing good, and nurturing the human spirit. We are a safe and courageous place in which members can build a community of friends, find inspiration and purpose, provide moral education for their children, celebrate seasons and life events, and clarify their world views. And now I turn it over to Anthony.
Thank you, Patty. Here at the Valley, may it be in person, virtually, or by listening to one of our recordings and programming, our essence, our ethics, our practice remain the same. At the Valley, we come together as a community every Sunday, every week, to deepen our sense of the meaningfulness of life, to shine light on the ideas with which we guide our choices, to give us courage to take the higher path and to get to know one another over time in appreciation of each one's unique and incompatible worth. And together we work for a world where love and justice cross all borders. Summarized, our statement of affirmation is that we affirm the worth, dignity, and uniqueness of every human being.
Thank you for those words, Anthony. And Olivia, Olivia, it looks like you're enjoying some warm spring sunshine today.
It's Aries season. I'm so excited. So I have a poem today. It's one of the most controversial poems I've written, but I figured if we're talking about ethical action, it's good to think about the shadows of ourselves, of our history. The poem is called White Projections. When I wrote it, I was thinking about how whiteness, I do distinguish whiteness from white people, because whiteness is a way of moving in community and society. At the time that I wrote it, I was aware that, you know, there's a difference between whiteness and white people, but I wanted to be honest with this poem and my disappointments with white people and their investment in whiteness. And I figured if we're talking about ethical action today, this might be something I was trying to figure out when to put this poem, when to like present this poem. And I think this is a good day for that. Everything that I talk about in the poem has been done to people of color. So it is a moment to reflect. If it pings something in your psyche, if it triggers something in reaction, it is a reflection on the projections of that whiteness is a projection onto others. And so, yeah, it's called White Projections. It's kind of, I'm gonna just begin. It's like white people are a danger to society. Cross the street so they don't cross you. Clutch your purse because they will rob you. Lock your doors. They'll take souls to cover for theirs lost. Drifting between fear, lies, and color coding, acting like they forgot. Color blinded and now they don't see red or white, but call blue when they want you dead. It's like white people need to be surveilled for danger, a stop and frisk and an extra pat down. We know the terror when we see it, questioning on where they've been and are headed. An Arizona can-shaped assault rifle, a hood disguise and a white head covered gown. It's like they need restricted access to spaces, send them back to where they came from, passport unlocked until we figure them out. Get them on cold metal tables and examine the way their mind functions. There must be something in the genes to produce psychosis, drapetomania to the head, fleeing a reality they kidnapped, sold, and bred. Our best surgeons and doctors digging graves for their dead, keeping the body parts fire grilled and hung by noose. Centuries later, it'll be as if they died peacefully in bed. It's like white people should be locked in cages, illegally occupying land. Their blood's not on the deed. Lose the key and a few casualties. Don't feed them because we don't know what they eat. Look through the zoo and publish their suffering. Scroll through the porn on their feeds. Tell ourselves that someday they'll pull bootstraps out of the mess they made themselves if they just believe. It's like white people's religion is causing havoc. Maybe their God is to blame. Burn down their churches and country clubs, the mansions and exclusive islands. Savage people attach to idols that won't win the battle and will remind them. Burn their Bible and spread disease. Leave them with waste-filled water for 5 years. Push them further, drinking their tears on a trail to contain reserved fields. It's like white people are the criminals here. Their youth, super predators on the loose. Babies on heroin and cocaine, now that their mothers want to lay claim. Poor wild things acted better when they drank back from black and brown nipples back in the day. Back in the day, a white person was far off in their cave. Let's make the globe a better place and put them back from where their ancestors came. It's a medical crisis. No vaccination can reverse the effects. Tried to teach them the value of wiping asses back when they almost wiped out with the plague. It's like we know their true nature and axes of evil we failed to address. The terror of it all brings me to snap my neck, looking back at all the facts and figures. You think white people could live in peace amongst all this manifesting destiny? The burden on the backs of men pursuing their happiness is a horror and terror in their bodies, a mirror of guilt constructed in the face of victims remembered by their blood and bone, a lingering trauma fastened to their memories till that's all they know. It's like white people live their worst fears out in rage expressed in bullets, entitlement to lies, and they have to make up the difference when chains reach all the way to the White House. It's like the hallucination is so real. They'll take offense to these words the moment it seeps into their fragile minds and hearts. The cries will reverberate around the world in bullets and bombs and nuclear threats to their ego. Over emotional and drowned and salty like bodies thrown overboard, like lives lost in 5 seconds over a toy. It's like white people are caught in a cycle, replaying the past like that's all that's left. Make America great again, make America great again, make America great for men whose bloodline is draped in sin so timeless it's their only original thing. For us, by them, TM. It's like the veil is thin, the hood is wearing them. It's like the idols they hold dear were in the game with their dead kin. White people online with their spirit guides, forgetting the ones guiding their spirit had violence in their eyes. It's like white people run away from their families, deadbeat daddies and mommies, kids who get the concept but dedicated to the terminology, who don't get the concept but dedicated to the terminology. It's like white people are living in fear of what they know they're capable of, enacting it first because they're behind on all the other stuff, projecting their inner pains, firing them in rounds like bullets in black bodies, gas canisters in an open prison system, soulless conversation in an Oval Office. It's like white people know the problem. It's like they live with it in a constant. It's like they see it on us. And so, yeah, that was a poem that I wrote. I was a little angry, but I also just wanted to be honest about the fact that a lot of whiteness is projections of stuff that, you know, the fear that's projected on people of color is very much based in a fear of what whiteness has already done. And so, yeah, that's my poem for this week, just as we think about ethical action and base ourselves in a history, root ourselves in a history, in our bodies that hold history. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. And I think that today, with this being a living ethics discussion, that you know, this month, the month of March, has been our month to be mindful. And we've had Olivia, who has been, you know, sharing with us each Sunday. We've had Olivia also do our platform program last Sunday, which, yes, Anthony, yes, very much so. And then earlier this month, we had Nadia from the American Humanists Association join us. And so, you know, there's a lot of humanism flowing among our organization, among ethical culture here this month of March. And I thought, you know, it would be good for us to reflect on Olivia's words and her poem, especially here this afternoon, but reflect on Nadia's talk with us as well. And maybe, you know, give some thought to how have platforms this month worked for you? And maybe we could just take some time and share some of our thoughts, our personal thoughts on what our platform programs in the month of March have meant, how they have resonated with you this month. If you're on Zoom, you can certainly type things into the chat and then hear it in person. If you have something you'd like to share, just make sure you're speaking loud enough so that the microphone picks it up for our folks who are online will be able to hear. Everyone's a moment to think about this past month. Anthony, you have your
Yeah, well,
raised.
since everyone seems
Yeah.
since everyone seems to be, meditating, contemplating, a little bit quiet, let me start us off. My memory is really bad, so I cannot even fathom 29 or 30 days back. However, I and other leaders had the opportunity of spending a weekend in DC for the Secular Coalition of America gathering, where a lot of the executive directors, leaders, et cetera, meet together to plan, to cast visions into the future, network, and so forth. And obviously, we had the privilege of having the executive director, Nadia Dutchens, with us, right? And she gave this powerful speech that I hope becomes public very, very soon. And I think that the speech is actually an embodiment of what not only what she shared on our Sunday platform, but basically her vision, desire, and an ethical living for the broad humanist communities, regardless of their expression, right, or philosophy. And I mean, I just come out short of words to really express the feeling in the room when she spoke. And I'm just saying, and all that to say, I'm hopeful for not only the future, but I'm hopeful for the present, for our today, especially for communities as ours, which is small and mighty and looking to engage the world in very transformative ways.
Thank you, Anthony. Anyone here like to share about your experiences this month with our platforms? Anything that it brought forth in you that you took with you maybe throughout the week, throughout the month?
Well,
Morty.
Now, let me tell you, the news of what's going on in Ukraine and so on and so forth sort of wiped virtually everything from my mind. What's going on there is so horrific that I just kept listening and thinking of the big picture. My wife said when they talk about World War III, she feels we're already in it. And not only the war, but the, I guess what they call the crimes that are being committed, the civilians and the children that are being wounded and killed. And quite frankly, that pretty much is on my mind, and with no room for anything else. It's really been bugging me.
We can all feel what Morty shared with us. Yes, it has been difficult to think about anything other than what's going on in Ukraine, and it's heartbreaking. And it makes me think about what it means to be a humanist. And there's something that, I hold, that if we would all just take, the essence of what it means to be a humanist and live it and spread it. I mean, I think, just being able to spread the message, and you wonder what holds us back from spreading the message. Any other thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I'm going to elaborate on what Morty said there. I have a son that's special forces, and he's in Latvia right now on the border there. And I was just offhand, because we're military, so we go back and forth and joke and stuff. I kicked some Russian butt. But he said to me, which sounds more humorous than what I said, he's there, Dad, I'd love to help them people, but my first responsibility is to my men and to keep them safe. I'd much prefer that I don't get into a situation that I have to fight. And you would think that somebody airborne, they would do that. But to me, that was like a teaching moment for me. And I'm ex-military. It's like, wow, my son grew up. Another thing, I was thinking about Olivia last week and the roots of our society. That's like, how do we get them out there? I try to put it into practice at work, and I'm a blue collar guy and everything. It's still, you hear so much, it just wears you day in and day out. And I correct people, I'll call it out when I hear it, but sometimes it's like you're just banging your head against the wall, but I'll keep doing it.
Yes, Kimmy, I want to share. Yes, Kimberly said, this is not Russia versus Ukraine. This is Putin's war. The Russian people don't want this. Thank you, Kim, for sharing that.
Well, and many of the Russian people don't even know what's going on because the propaganda and disinformation that's being spewed in Russia, they don't understand what's going on, truly.
I think you're right. From what I've been hearing, reading, many do not know. And it doesn't look like they're ever going to know because the information has been blocked, from them. Yes. And Kim says, okay, Kimmy replies, our media is guilty of propaganda as well.
Yeah.
Yes. And we know that to be true.
That gets me in a craw too. It's like, I think it's wonderful that the world's opening their borders to all the Ukrainian refugees. We had refugees here and we threw them in damn cages, Look in the mirror before you start pointing the finger. We need to go a long way in this country.
So I guess this might lead us into another question that, and what Rick just said, how have you been brought to think differently about our ethical humanist community? With what's going on, in the world, what our programs the month of March have maybe brought you to think differently about what we are, who we are, I know yesterday I attended the American Ethical Union's memorial for our dear Elle Miller. And there were things that made me see things differently about the movement in a positive way. It was a positive message that I was taking in. Anthony, you have your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been really reflecting the past few weeks around ethics and how ethics is not just an intellectual exercise, right? But it's a way of relating across difference. And given the multiple opportunities that I've had with engaging with leaders and professors and friends and colleagues and paying attention to the news, I think that we are being challenged to move or be aware of not only what's happening regionally, nationally, but also developing a sensibility and an understanding of our global citizenship, right? And especially if we are humanists, non-religious, ... right? I think that there is this impulse to be more aware, because we understand that the change that we want to do in the world, that the lives that we want to touch or be in connection with is our responsibility, right? So as you were saying, Patty, like what's holding us back? I mean, I would say that for me, and responding to myself would be me. Like I am holding myself back. I'm self-sabotaging, right? And so how do we then pay attention to an ethic, again, that is not just within the mind, but it's actually an ethics that's enacted in behavior and actions, again, that are not just one-sided, that are not just one time, but actually that it's continually being sustained, and hopefully that it ripples through our different movements, and hopefully, I would say, an ethic that develops then a network that is life-giving.
Thank you, Anthony.
Well,
Okay, Guy.
I haven't been here for the last month, so I haven't been involved with, I haven't seen the programs. And I have to admit that I don't watch much news anymore. I stopped watching the news some months ago, and I personally feel much better. I get enough news just listening to it in the morning on public radio for about an hour is sufficient. But I want to respond to what Olivia had to say. About 7 or 8 years ago, I got involved with a group in Harrisburg that works in Allison Hill. And if you're not familiar with Harrisburg, it's a very poor section, crushing poverty. And I went in there with the mistaken idea, although not consciously, it just was what I was thinking, how I told the world was, I was going to go save these people, the white savior was going to come to help them out. And I'm a little slow. It took me a while to catch on. That's not what was going to happen. If anything was going to happen. Part of it was through some programs that we had going on at the Unitarian Church about examining your whiteness, which I found very enlightening. But yesterday morning in Allison Hill, working with a group there that's been going on since the Women's March on Washington when Trump was elected. And they started a group down there, and it has somewhat evolved. And now what they're primarily doing is working in the neighborhood to help make the neighborhoods better, to help get lighting in the neighborhood, help show the people there how to access their government and get their government to work for them. And also to get out to vote. So yesterday was one of our get out to vote days, which we do once a month. And so we were, trying to sign people up to register the vote and reminding them about the upcoming elections. And I feel like I'm accomplishing a whole lot more by doing things like that. I am than arguing with wacko people about the world that we live in. Because I don't seem to make much headway there. Besides, I feel a lot better doing this. It's almost like there's a certain lightness of being. So I hear what you're saying, Olivia. I know that we haven't sort of done a very good job, and I'm sure I still have a lot to learn about all of that. And hopefully I'll be paying enough attention to catch on.
Thank you, Guy, for sharing that. I was hearing Rick and what Rick tries to do in his workplace as an individual. And then I listened to Guy, and Guy, I am assuming that this is a community that is coming together and working together and listening, hearing voices. So I'm wondering if that concept of community action, working together in creating, action, is what maybe, what am I looking for? Maybe that is what it means to be part of an ethical humanist community. Any thoughts on that?
I guess I'm just affirming what you're saying, because I was also thinking about, was it Rick talking about being in a blue collar workplace and trying to bring ethical action to that daily, their daily space. And also thinking about the poem, and like when we talk about thinking about ethical action and how that might be different than, like, say, missionary work. And the idea of, like, a lot of times whiteness is like narcissism and not wanting to be like a kind of like narcissist. I was watching something on Instagram talking about like the covert narcissism in communities, people who just want to, they help and they help and they help and they help. And it's all very like, they create this identity of the savior, as you were talking about before, like not wanting to bring white saviors. And so I guess I was thinking about the idea of like helping and how can bring how, or what are maybe some ways that people have already brought ethical action to their daily lives, even outside of like what is on a daily basis in the details. What does like ethical action look like, so that it's not this idea that we need to go somewhere to, help, but how can it be like an ethical action that is like internal, that kind of shines outward rather than the other way around. Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Well, I believe that contrary to individual cases, that my generation and the generation that's now are more aware, or let me put it this way, are less aware of the differences of people. I remember my parents, now I come from a typical Jewish middle class situation, they would swear they weren't prejudiced. Well, prejudice wasn't even a word. It was just assumed that Black people were not as good as white people. In fact, this happened, I don't know how many years ago. But we were listening on the radio to, I think it was probably Lena Horne, the singer. And it was my father or friend or something like that, said, oh, she must have some white blood in her to sing so well. And it was not a sort of prejudice, it was the way it was. And I think that's changed quite a bit now. Even the awareness of differences and that people are individuals and are doing good or bad as individuals, not as a part of a group, has become more the mainstream, or getting towards the mainstream, rather than what happened 70, 80 years ago. So there is improvement, certainly not enough and not fast enough, but I see improvement. I see changes in general attitudes, quietly, not more people doing things, but basically the concept of differences based on color or based on religion or based on any other group characteristics is slowly fading away. I know it's not fast enough for a lot of people, right? And I don't think it's going to be any faster because it's from generation to generation to generation, and not from year to year to year, or from the month of March to the month of April to the month of May. But I think there is improvement. And again, it's a long, hard pull because you're changing people's minds, their mindsets. But it is happening. Believe it or not, I think television has done a lot. And you see Black actors and actresses, Black commentators, and people, in the news, it starts to make you not see them as colored people or white people or this religion or that religion. They are people, period. And the next generation will be better, and the generation will be better than that. As I said, you can't do it overnight, but it is happening, I think.
Thank you, Morty.
Hey, Patty. I just want to interject here a little bit. And I just want to, and I'm just kind of speaking on myself and kind of where my view of all of this is at, as far as when it comes to listening to Olivia. first of all, I will say that I know, as far as me as a white person, I will apologize because I think it's horrible in the sense of the way that as a white person, that as even white people in general, how we can be so cruel and mean. When I think of the Ukraine situation, as I do think it is a horrible situation, I think that as I was in a conversation over the weekend, that we have wars going on here in our own country, and that war is called racism. And I know as far as me and where I have, when I look at my whiteness or just in general, I don't have to go very far. Sometimes I walk into my living room and there stands Jay. Sometimes I walk down the hallway, there's Cynthia. I don't have to go far. So it's a daily practice. Does that mean that we're always going to say or do the right thing as white people? Absolutely not. But it's a daily practice, and we have waited way too long for change to happen. And I think as a white individual, myself, and those of us in this room that are white, we need to step it up. And time is wasting away. And I said over the weekend in a memorial service with a beautiful, beautiful story of a relationship of a Black man and a white man. They dealt with all kinds of things for years throughout their marriage and throughout their togetherness. And so I received a lot from that service, sitting in a room full of white people. And I think it's just important that we just get our, excuse my French, get our shit together. And Olivia, I thank you. I thank you for those words. I thank you for that poem. I thank you for that truth and just speaking it and not being afraid to speak it. I just thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
I think Cynthia's going to say something here too.
Yes. Hi, Patty.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hi. Hi to everyone in the audience. Olivia, your poem was just awesome. It expressed so many different things. And I was just listening to Brian, and truly yesterday out of the memorial service as well, it really spoke to my heart as well. Patty, you have truly been a blessing, you, your family. I can honestly see when I'm in the midst of your family, Jay and I, we feel no division. We feel no prejudiceness at all, acceptance, that's all that we feel. But on a daily life scale for Black Americans, it's not like that with everybody. And even yesterday, in the room there, it was so few people of color, and they made conversations, came over to visit and have conversation, but you can feel, even when it's not genuine, you walked over to talk to us because we're present and we're in your circle, but it wouldn't have been something that you would have just done. So I agree with Brian. I wasn't brought up to look at a white person as my enemy. My mother didn't raise us like that. And I'm like, 70. But my mom never, ever, ever, and I thank God for her, said, I didn't get the job because they gave it to a white person. Or, you know, if I had been white, then the situation would have been different. When you grow up like that, then you struggle when you see how people treat you, but it is a fact of life. The only way there can be a change is for each individual to examine themselves and see inside of yourself. You can say you're not racist, you can say you're not prejudiced, all you want to. But if someone brings a black man home and you are white and your daughter is dating a black man, and all of a sudden it's gonna hit you. You're gonna feel it, and you're gonna still try to cover it. I agree with Brian. It's time for us to just be sincere, genuine, and get rid of the garbage, because we're all the same. If something happens to a white person and they need an organ, guess what? They can take an organ from a black person. Are you gonna refuse it, or are you gonna let it save your life? So we just need to really, in your organization, we really need to just see the practice of acceptance of all nationalities and colors. It doesn't matter. We're all human beings.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, if everybody could be like you and your family, a poem that she read wouldn't affect anybody too much, but she had to read that poem because people need to check themselves, because there's not a whole lot of Patties and her husband and her mother around that of your European ethnic background. And I love you, but I just wanted to share with you how I feel. And I think others amongst you need to really examine their heart, because that's where it's at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Keep writing, girl.
You bet. You betcha. Thank you, Cynthia. Love you too. I had to take my mask off so you could see my smiling. I also, when Morty said, nothing is going to happen next week, at the end of the month, at the end of the year, that, but yeah, maybe that's the reality, but I sure as heck want to change that. I want to change that.
Well, we all want to change it,
Yeah.
but speaking from reality, it's not, I'm going through this door and then all of a sudden it's changed. People work to improve things, that's great. I mentioned the commentators and the politicians and all. These people didn't come around because just a fate, because other people were pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And I firmly believe that it will happen. That eventually it'll just be the humans, period. And then that'll be it. Whether we'll live to see it, quite frankly, I doubt it. But will our children, maybe, our children's children, maybe more. So I know in my own family, it was very lucky that I ended up marrying a Jewish girl and my sister married a Jewish boy, because if we didn't, there would have been hell to pay, quite frankly. And the situation now is like with my family, we're completely diversified with my kids, and So, and we don't think anything of it. It's the way it is, and it's fine. And their children will be the same way because this is the way they were brought up. And so it's a matter of the individuals getting the mindset again that we're all human, nothing else, no other characteristics.
I listened to that, Morty, and when my husband and I then were dating in college, I remember my father, you know, it was, what do you mean you're dating this long-haired hippie? You know? So, yeah. Rick?
I often think, like when I said I feel like I'm just banging my head against the wall, I got to ad lib a Sojourn Truth quote that always comes to my mind. That somebody had asked her, "Why do you waste your time, old women? You make no more impact than a flea bite." And she answered, "Well, with the grace of God, I'll keep you scratching." So, you know, if you keep them scratching, maybe you can get through.
Yeah.
I want to hop in here for a brief second. I know I'm driving, so I'll be brief. The psychologist Carl Jung made a statement some time ago in his discovery of doing his work, saying that thinking is difficult. That's why people judge. Thinking is difficult. That is why people judge. The work that we do when we come together, when we have conversation, when we have moments that allow for us to engage, whether it be poetry, whether it be the news, or whether it be just simple relationship building, it should offer us a perspective in thinking, Not everybody's thinking works the same way. Not everybody's knowledge is the same way. Some of us are hands-on. Some of us are practice-based. Some of us are deep readers. Some of us are writers. Some of us learn visually. Some of us learn spatially and through math and various formations. These are various formations that inform how we know and how we learn. And if we think about that just for a moment, and we tap into our own art of thinking, if you will, our own art of thinking, we begin to practice better. We begin to practice being human better. We begin to practice how we are human together better. And we begin to reserve judgment and decide through our practice how to best walk alongside each other in our difference. And I find that it is very important that when we listen to either poetry or whether we listen to the speakers of the past few weeks that have offered us different insights, we need to ask the question, how will we walk alongside each other in our unique approach to how we think about the situation? I can honestly say I'm a person who hears, yes, the reality that Morty presents to us, and it is a very real reality that things are slow. And I would push and say that too, every generation will deal with a moving goalpost called freedom. Freedom today might be at the 50-yard line. And tomorrow, it could be at the 70-yard line. It's an ever-moving goalposts. But our job is to make sure that we kick the ball forward and tackle anything in our way. That's what freedom and the love for freedom and the practice of freedom helps us decide to do. I really am often, I kind of am leery of often the conversation of justice, especially in a very polarized community and sometimes a very polarized environment that we live in today, where people want to win and then have a loser. There's a winner and a loser, and we don't have a real practice of bipartisan relationships. And we become so polarized that we are only interested in one side winning the justice and the other side losing and feeling injustice. And so I'm often engaged in the idea of freedom, because everyone has the right to that. And to figure out how we do that is in figuring out how we practice different ways on how we will decide to walk alongside each other. I add lastly that as we think about maybe that practice, and as I've offered this challenge in how we have seen justice in our institution, I'm a person who deeply loves Malcolm X, and I love James Baldwin, mostly from the era in which most of you probably know Malcolm X. You would not highlight him as an amazing individual or his practices. And we probably know the story of Malcolm from a very, very small view, and it's often tainted. I've often been told that Malcolm was a violent man. Malcolm was not a violent man. Malcolm understood the New York penalty code. So he understood if somebody hit him, he had the right to hit them back. It's just very challenging when Black people know the law that and know the penalty code, that when it comes out of such mouths, it does sound like it is violent. And we prefer to think of our movement as somewhat being deeply nonviolent. And I would offer this insight. Malcolm, just like Baldwin, James Baldwin, they offer us an insight to engage consciousness, the real cultivated thinking, to focus really deeply on areas that need to be reimagined, revised, changed, and maybe in some cases disrupted. Consciousness and awareness of one's freedom we have to begin to look at, because legislation is slow. Politics are slow. But denying someone of their humanity by waiting on politics and waiting on legislation never changes the way that one is expected to love themselves as an act of consciousness. Malcolm and Baldwin were individuals about consciousness, particularly Black consciousness within the era that they were writing and speaking. Where Dr. King was focusing on legislative progression, Malcolm X was rooted in conscious progression. How one should love themselves when the law says not to love yourself. How does one begin to care for themselves when the law says you cannot care for yourself? Those are tough separations. And I think in spaces when we engage ethics, we have the ability to push on the politics, push on the legislation, while also holding simultaneously the real work of a consciousness of one's own autonomy and agency to engage their personal freedom. I'm sure that is the challenge at hand. And I find that a lot of what we need to engage is that idea of self-care as culture care. So I just encourage us to, think about it further, to think about the work that we can do constantly. I know if you're not familiar with James Baldwin, I would, especially invite you to read James Baldwin more, because his writing, particularly within Fire Next Time, did start, was kind of the big flame for the civil rights movement, in addition to the work of Malcolm X, and alongside, and I think that's a further conversation we can have about how he understood his work within the Black Power movement, and also within the civil rights movement as a collective. I think, and beyond just race, how all of these freedoms in general, whether we're talking about sex, whether we're talking about gender, whether we're talking about age, whether we're talking about nationality, religion, and so on and so forth. There's an area of freedom that has to be engaged as we constantly keep seeing this perpetuating, moving goalpost. So yeah, that's just a few thoughts that come to mind as we are engaging and thinking about our ethical practice.
Thank you, Jay. Sorry, I was muted. Thank you for sharing that. Any thoughts? Everyone's taking that in. Olivia?
Yeah, I have thoughts. They're not organized at the moment.
Okay.
But I was also like thinking of steering, like being aware of like what I guess what Jay was talking about last week, like recognizing the like abundance that we like already have here. Just today I've like realized it, and I guess I've lowered my expectations for a lot of white community, and today was very like I guess grateful for the conversations we're having. One, I've in the way about looking at the ways that awareness go out personal, local, national, and global space, and our conversation on Ukraine and how like I'm being aware of the way
Oops. Olivia, we dropped you.
to so Ukraine versus Russia, really
Yeah.
about
Olivia?
that.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm thinking about the Hello.
Yeah, Olivia, I'm sorry. We weren't picking up a lot of what you were sharing with us. I'm so sorry. Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay, no, that's good because I wasn't really saying much. I wasn't really
You were. You always, but I did pick up that you were feeling something being able to share here today in this white space. Which
I guess I was thinking about what like Jay was talking last week about like, and a lot of what the presentation was about was the abundance, like being rooted in what we already have and the abundance that we already have. And like this conversation alone is showing a lot of like what matters. We talked a lot about awareness, the importance of awareness pertaining to differences in people, awareness of the fact that we already have a community that embraces people at a deep level that you don't feel in a lot of, well, at least I haven't felt in a lot of other community spaces. It's a and so also the awareness of whiteness. We talked about the awareness of whiteness and white supremacy in personal, local, regional, national, and global spaces. And then the awareness that there's different ways of learning and thinking, like Jay was saying. So I guess I just wanted to bring some further awareness of of the gems already found here, and thinking about how we can, as we are aware of those gems, the awareness of like how we embrace community, how we embrace different ways of thinking and learning, how we embrace the awareness of whiteness and how it works. Because when we're talking about Ukraine versus Russia, there's a lot of that is steeped in like white supremacy and imperialism, not so much what's happening, but the media and like the reactions to it is a lot of steeped in white supremacy. And not that we shouldn't corral for Ukraine, but it's the way that it's being pushed to corral or to gather for Ukraine in very, very different ways than we're asked to gather for Palestine or anywhere in South America or anywhere on the African continent or anywhere in some poor Black neighborhood in the US or anywhere, all these other spaces where there's not this national global push to gather. And it kind of, for me, adds some suspicion to who's benefiting from that. And so this is like all of this and then our awareness on a personal level with our whiteness and how we move with whiteness, and on a communal level. And so just wanting to like bring awareness to how our awareness is like already like a gift and an abundance that we have, and how we can like build off of that to share that with others and make that sort of like the only word I have right now is like a promotional flag, like and not in a self-serving way, but just in a way that we continue to do that, and that kind of shines the flag on its own. And then also I wanted to say that with my poem, I did talk about white people, but also like when we think about whiteness, it is something that moves through beliefs, behaviors, values, and thoughts. It's not, of course, white people are gain more from being invested in it and for perpetuating it and living in it, but it is a kind of I don't know what to call it, like a belief or thought that like seeps through. And so I guess whenever I always hesitate to share that poem because I'm not sharing it in a way where I'm looking where it's to, and of course I can't control reactions to the art, but it's not in a way to look for a sort of like apology or anything like that. It's just because just an awareness of like whiteness and how even Black people can, anybody can invest in whiteness, and there's like many layers to that. And so I guess I'm saying that to say, like, we're already sort of in some ways aware of that with our conversation on Ukraine and how Ukraine and Russia's becoming this like versus thing in the media. And so, yeah, I'm just like sharing the appreciation for the immense awareness and the ways that the abundance of what we already have here, and hope to like build off of it.